Yeah, many people often wonder if I've had a number of items of property that were destroyed in a fire, I've got these other losses, what kind of documentation do I typically need for that? What do I need to start thinking about now? And I will tell you, in my experience, most of the time in these large catastrophic wildfires, that most folks aren't going to have receipts from the property that they lost. They aren't going to have photographs or video evidence. And I will give you comfort right now is that typically that is not going to be an absolute requirement. Certainly it'd be nice to have, but the reality is most of the documentation of folks who've lost their entire home in a fire was burned along with the rest of the fire. So let me talk about what that process typically looks like. So usually with respect to the real property, we just will ultimately get from our client that their identification and the address that they were looking at, and we can validate that they were the owners or leasing a particular property from the county property records. The heavy lifting in this, and really the most intensive part for most clients, are putting together a list of the items of personal property they lost to come up with here's what the total value of my property is. Again, ultimately, this is about trying to get folks legal compensation from their losses for the fire. But I will say it's much more than that. I remember a client of mine, Larry, who is a 70-year-old gentleman, a guy's guy, very grizzled, and I'm sitting down with him and we're going through the list of the property that he lost in the fire. And I recall, there were some very valuable things in his home that he lost, large TVs, those types of things. And I remember Larry getting to the part where he just broke down. And I remember Larry putting down and asking me, how do I put a value on the shadow box of my dad's World War II medals? So I recognize, look, we're trying to get the best compensation for our clients with respect to the value of these items that are lost. But again, I recognize it's also more than that. One other thing I will say in terms of keeping records of what you've lost in the fire, right now in my experience, most folks are displaced at this time with respect to the Dixie Fire, and you're going to have hotel receipts, restaurants, and all these other temporary living expenses that you wouldn't necessarily have had otherwise. And you want to do as best you can to keep those receipts so that ideally when the time comes and we can put together your losses, that not only we can include the personal property, the real property that you may have lost in this fire, but we can also include those temporary living expenses as well.